On October 14, 1982, Dr. Helen Marsh made her final hydrophone calibration at 7:43 in the morning. By 9:15, the research vessel Cayuga sat empty at anchor 2 miles off Burlington, Vermont. The Coast Guard ruled it accidental drowning, case closed in 72 hours. But they never explained why her logbook was missing pages, or why the university sealed her research files before the search ended, or why the magnetic tape from that morning's recording showed 3 hours of data simply erased, not corrupted, not damaged, but deliberately overwritten with silence. Helen Marsh spent 11 years listening to Lake Champlain. Something she heard that October morning made sure she'd never listen to anything again. Paul Lindquist received the cardboard box on a Tuesday in February, 4 months after Helen's memorial service. No return address, postmarked Burlington. Inside, 23 cassette tapes with handwritten labels, a water-damaged notebook, and a single photograph of Helen standing on the Cayuga's deck, pointing at something off-frame. The tapes were her personal recordings, field notes she dictated during the expedition. The university had given him her published data. This was something else entirely. Helen, October 8, 1982. Third day of the hydrophone survey. Paul, if you're hearing this, I'm documenting something the department won't want in the official record. There's a low-frequency signature at 47 Hz. It's not geological, it's not biological, and it appears every night between 2 and 4 a.m., always from the same bearing. 237 degrees magnetic. Lindquist played that tape 6 times before he understood what Helen was telling him. She'd found something, and she'd known, even then, that she might need a witness outside the university. The Department of Natural Resources occupied a corner of the Furnow Hall basement, cramped offices with exposed pipes and the permanent smell of mildew. Dr. Warren Holt had been Helen's supervisor for 6 years. He kept a photograph of the two of them on his desk, taken at a conference in Woods Hole.
Warren, I need to see Helen's original data, the raw recordings from October.
Paul, you know I can't do that.
Why not? She was my colleague, my friend.
The university sealed those files. Legal department's decision, not mine.
Legal? She was studying fish migration patterns. What possible legal issue?
I don't know. I asked the same question. They told me to drop it.
Holt's hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee from a dented thermos. He was lying about something. Lindquist had known him for 15 years. The man couldn't hold eye contact.
Let it go, Paul. For your own sake. Helen wouldn't want you digging into this.
Lindquist spread Helen's annotated charts across his kitchen table. Her handwriting filled the margins. Calculations, bearings, depth estimates. She'd traced the signal's origin to a point in the deepest part of the lake, 300 feet down, where the bottom dropped into an underwater canyon. In geological surveys, that area appeared as a featureless depression. Helen had circled it in red ink and written a single word: artificial. I'm going to deploy a directional array tomorrow. If this is what I think it is, I need confirmation before I take it to anyone. God help me if I'm wrong about this. The marina in Burlington had closed for winter, but the harbor master kept an office in a converted boathouse that smelled of diesel and old rope. Ed Farrell had worked the lake for 31 years. He'd been the one to call the Coast Guard when the Cayuga was found drifting.
Yeah, I knew Dr. Marsh. She'd been coming up here every fall since '75. Nice lady. Kept to herself mostly.
You found her boat.
Found it empty. That's different.
The report said she went overboard during rough weather.
Farrell laughed, a short, bitter sound.
Rough weather. October 14th was flat, calm. I could see my reflection in that lake. Coast Guard wrote what they were told to write.
Told by whom?
Mister, I've said more than I should. You want answers, talk to the Navy boys who showed up before the Coast Guard did.
Lindquist felt the cold air sharpen around him.
What Navy boys?
Lindquist spent 3 days at the Burlington Public Library, searching microfilm archives for any mention of Navy activity on Lake Champlain. He found nothing. The lake was freshwater, landlocked, with no strategic value. There was no reason for the Navy to operate there. October 12th. I deployed the directional array at 1400 hours. The signal is stronger than I expected, much stronger. Paul, this isn't passive. Something down there is actively transmitting. The frequency signature matches Soviet submarine communication protocols from the early 70s. I pulled the reference from a declassified ONR report. I don't understand what I'm looking at. Lindquist stopped the tape. Soviet submarine protocols on a freshwater lake in Vermont. He rewound and played it again, certain he'd misheard. But Helen's voice was clear, precise, the voice of a scientist reporting data. I'm going to record a full spectrum analysis tonight. If this is what the data suggests, someone needs to know. Someone outside the university. The Office of Naval Research had funded Cornell's acoustic research program since 1964. Lindquist found the grant records in the university's public filings. Routine payments for equipment, student stipends, publication costs. But in November 1982, 2 weeks after Helen's death, a new grant appeared. $200,000. Unrestricted funds. No project description.
Margaret, I need the disbursement records for this ONR grant.
Dr. Lindquist, those files are restricted.
Since when? I've accessed grant records before.
Since last month. New policy from the provost's office.
The administrative assistant wouldn't meet his eyes. She was perhaps 50, had worked in the grants office for 2 decades. Lindquist had known her to bend rules for faculty she trusted.
Margaret, please, this is about Helen.
I know it is. That's why I can't help you.
She turned back to her typewriter. The conversation was over. Lindquist pulled out a map of Lake Champlain. Bearing 055 from Helen's survey position pointed to a stretch of undeveloped shoreline north of Plattsburgh. He'd driven past it once, years ago. There was nothing there but forest and a few abandoned farms. I'm going to move the Cayuga closer to the deep water source tomorrow. I need a clearer recording. Warren doesn't know what I've found. I haven't told anyone at the department. I don't trust them anymore. Her voice on the tape sounded different now. Strained. Frightened. Plattsburgh newspaper archives yielded nothing about Navy activity. But Lindquist found something else. A property transfer from 1969. 40 acres of lakefront land, purchased by a company called Northern Acoustic Research Ltd. The company had no other public records, no employees, no products, no address except a P.O. box in Washington, D.C.
I need to see the original deed.
That file's been requested by another party. It's not available.
When will it be returned?
Indefinitely, sir.
The county clerk was young, perhaps 25, with the nervous energy of someone following orders they didn't understand.
Who requested it?
I'm not authorized to disclose that information. Since someone with federal credentials asked us to hold them.
Lindquist left the courthouse with more questions than answers. Someone was cleaning up after Helen, and they were doing it thoroughly. Lindquist drove to the property coordinates from the deed transfer. The road turned to gravel after 3 miles, then to rutted dirt. A chain-link fence appeared through the bare November trees, topped with barbed wire. No signs, no markings. Just a gate with a heavy padlock and a single security camera mounted on a wooden post. October 13th, addendum. I called the harbor master to ask about the deep water area. He got very quiet. Said Navy divers had been working that section of the lake last summer. Some kind of equipment retrieval, he thought. But Paul, there's no record of it. I checked with the Coast Guard, the State Environmental Office, everyone. No permits, no notifications. It's like it never happened. Lindquist sat in his car, watching the security camera slowly pan across the gate. Helen had found something the Navy wanted to stay hidden, and now she was gone. The camera's lens caught a glint of weak sunlight as it turned toward his vehicle. He put the car in reverse and backed down the road. The Office of Naval Research occupied a suite of offices in Arlington, Virginia. Lindquist called the public affairs number and asked about acoustic research programs on Lake Champlain. He was transferred 3 times before reaching a woman who identified herself only as Ms. Patterson.
Dr. Lindquist, I understand you've been making inquiries about a former colleague.
How do you know my name?
We received a courtesy notification from Cornell. Your interest has been noted.
I'm trying to understand what happened to Dr. Marsh.
Dr. Marsh drowned in a boating accident. The Coast Guard investigation was thorough.
The Coast Guard investigation lasted 3 days.
Sometimes the facts are straightforward.
Her voice was pleasant, professional, utterly without warmth.
Dr. Lindquist, I'd strongly recommend you focus on your own research. Lake Champlain's acoustics have been thoroughly studied. There's nothing new to discover there.
The line went dead. She hadn't said goodbye. Among Helen's personal effects, Lindquist found a letter dated September 28, 1982. It was addressed to him, but never mailed. Helen, dear Paul, I'm writing this in case something happens and I don't have a chance to explain. For the past 3 years, I've been detecting anomalous signals during my fall surveys. I didn't report them because I wasn't sure what I was hearing. Now I am. There's something on the bottom of Lake Champlain that shouldn't be there. I believe it's a listening station, a permanent underwater installation for monitoring acoustic traffic. The Navy has been using our lake as a testing ground for submarine detection technology. They've been doing it for at least 12 years, probably longer. Lindquist set down the letter. His hands were shaking. Helen, I don't know who installed it or why, but I know someone at Cornell has been helping them keep it secret. Warren approved my survey schedules. He always made sure I was nowhere near the deep water in October. Until this year, when I changed my route without telling him. Lindquist returned to Warren Holt's office unannounced. The basement hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights humming their constant monotone.
You've been managing her survey routes for years.
Paul, what are you talking about?
Helen figured it out. She changed her route without telling you. That's why October was different.
Holt's face went pale. He reached for his coffee thermos, then stopped.
You don't understand the position I'm in.
Then explain it to me.
I can't. I signed agreements. Legal agreements.
With whom? The Navy? ONR?
I'm not going to discuss this.
Helen is dead, Warren. Our friend is dead, and you're protecting the people responsible.
Holt stood abruptly, knocking his chair against the filing cabinet.
Get out of my office.
What did they promise you? What was her life worth?
Get out. Now.
His voice cracked on the last word. Whatever Warren Holt was hiding, it was eating him alive. This was the last tape. Lindquist had listened to it dozens of times, searching for any clue about what happened next. The recording continued for another 47 minutes. Engine sounds, water lapping against the hull, Helen's breathing as she worked the equipment. Then, at 7:38 a.m., her voice returned. There's a boat approaching from the northwest. No running lights. I can't see it through the fog, but the engines are... The recording ended. 3 hours of magnetic silence followed. The Coast Guard station in Burlington maintained logs of all vessel traffic on the lake. Lindquist filed a Freedom of Information request for October 14, 1982. The response came 3 weeks later. The requested records had been transferred to the Department of Defense and were not subject to civilian disclosure.
Someone tracked every boat on that lake. There has to be a record of who approached Helen's position.
There is. I keep my own logs.
Ed Farrell's office was unchanged from Lindquist's last visit. The same diesel smell, the same coiled rope on the wall hooks. But the harbor master looked older, more tired.
I wasn't going to show you this, but I liked Dr. Marsh. She was a good woman.
He pulled a water-stained notebook from his desk drawer.
October 14th, 6:45 a.m. Gray hull, no markings, approximately 40 feet. Headed northwest toward the deep water. I noted it because it wasn't a local boat. Never seen it before. Never seen it since.
Did you tell the Coast Guard?
I told them. They told me I was mistaken.
Lindquist spent 2 weeks searching for anyone who might have seen the unmarked vessel. He talked to fishermen, dock workers, seasonal residents closing their camps for winter. Most remembered nothing. But a retired postal carrier named Ruth Novak had been walking her dog on the Burlington waterfront that morning.
I remember the fog. Couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. But I heard engines. Big ones, not like the fishing boats.
Did you see anything?
Just a shape, gray, like you said, moving fast toward the middle of the lake. And there was something else.
What?
Another boat following it, smaller, white hull with red trim.
Lindquist felt his pulse quicken. The Cayuga had a white hull with red trim.
I thought it was strange. 2 boats going out in that fog? But people do foolish things on the water. I didn't think about it again until I read about the drowning in the paper.
You didn't tell anyone?
Who would I tell? It was just boats.
Helen's water-damaged notebook contained fragments of data she hadn't transferred to tape. Most pages were illegible, the ink blurred beyond recognition. But one section, protected by a plastic sleeve, remained readable. It was a frequency analysis chart, hand-drawn with meticulous precision. At the bottom, Helen had written, "Matches ONR Technical Report 67-442, Appendix C, Soviet Project, Sever Communication Protocols."
Project Sever. Soviet Submarine Communications.
Lindquist called a colleague at MIT who specialized in Cold War acoustics. Dr. James Whitfield had consulted for the Navy in the 1960s before returning to academic work.
Where did you hear that name?
A friend's research notes. She was studying Lake Champlain.
Paul, listen to me carefully. Project Sever was a Soviet program for testing extremely low-frequency communications in freshwater environments. The theory was that certain lakes could serve as acoustic mirrors, bouncing signals between underwater installations.
Why would the Soviets test that in Lake Champlain?
They wouldn't. But we might test countermeasures there.
Lindquist drove to Cambridge to meet Whitfield in person. The professor's office at MIT was cluttered with acoustic equipment from 3 decades of research. Oscilloscopes, spectrum analyzers, shelves of magnetic tape reels.
I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. In 1970, the Navy approached several universities about hosting acoustic research programs. The public mission was studying marine biology. The real mission was developing detection systems for Soviet submarines.
Cornell was one of those universities.
I can't confirm that, but Lake Champlain has unique acoustic properties. Deep, cold, relatively isolated. If you wanted to test submarine detection equipment without anyone noticing, it would be ideal.
Helen found something on the bottom of the lake. She thought it was a permanent installation.
Whitfield was silent for a long moment.
Paul, if your friend found what I think she found, you need to stop asking questions. These people don't leave loose ends.
These people killed her.
I didn't say that. I'm not saying anything. But I'd strongly advise you to go home and forget this conversation ever happened.
Back in Ithaca, Lindquist found a note under his apartment door. No signature, just 3 words. Stop. Go home. October 12th, personal note. Paul, I've been thinking about what happens if I'm right about all this. The university has been complicit for years. The Navy has been operating in secret on American soil. If I go public with this data, I'll be ending careers, including Warren's, maybe my own. But I keep thinking about the principle of the thing. Science is supposed to be about truth. If we let institutions decide which truths are acceptable, we've already lost. Lindquist sat in his dark apartment, listening to Helen's voice fill the silence. She had known the risks. She had documented everything carefully, sent copies to him, prepared for the possibility that she wouldn't survive to tell the story herself. And now he was the only one who could finish what she'd started. I trust you, Paul. If something happens to me, I trust you to do the right thing. Lindquist began making copies of everything. Helen's tapes, her notes, his own research. He mailed packets to 3 colleagues at different universities, each with instructions to open them only if he failed to check in within 2 weeks. Then he drove to the Cornell Library and requested every declassified document mentioning Lake Champlain and the Office of Naval Research.
Dr. Lindquist, several of these documents have been reclassified.
Reclassified? When?
Last month, I received a notice from the Federal Depository Program. The materials are no longer available for public access.
Someone was actively erasing the paper trail. Every document Helen might have referenced, every piece of corroborating evidence, was disappearing in the classification.
Can you tell me which documents were removed?
I have a list, but I'm not sure I should.
Please, this is important.
The librarian hesitated, then slid a handwritten list across the counter. 7 documents, all related to acoustic research, all dated between 1967 and 1975. The list included one document Lindquist recognized. ONR Technical Report 67-442. Helen had referenced it in her notebook. He called Whitfield at MIT.
I need a copy of ONR Technical Report 67-442.
Paul, I told you to stop.
I can't stop. They're destroying evidence. If I don't document this now, there won't be anything left to find.
A long pause on the line.
Understood.
Come to Cambridge tomorrow. Don't fly. They track reservations. Drive, and don't tell anyone where you're going.
Lindquist hung up the phone and looked around his apartment. The note under his door. The reclassified documents. The warning from a colleague who'd worked with the Navy. He was being watched. He was probably being followed. And he was going anyway. The drive to Cambridge took 6 hours. Lindquist stopped twice for gas, paying cash both times. He kept checking his rearview mirror for any car that stayed with him too long. By the time he reached Whitfield's office, his nerves were raw.
You look terrible.
I haven't been sleeping well.
Whitfield handed him a manila envelope. Inside was a faded document, marked confidential, in red letters that had faded to pink over the years.
This report describes the theoretical basis for using freshwater lakes as acoustic test beds. Appendix C details the frequency signatures of Soviet submarine communications, the exact signatures your friend identified.
So she was right.
She was right about everything. The Navy has been operating an underwater listening station in Lake Champlain since at least 1968. They use the Cornell program as cover, legitimate research that justifies their presence and provides data they can classify.
And when Helen found out,
She became a security risk.
Whitfield's voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of a man stating facts he wished weren't true. Lindquist drove back to Ithaca that night, the classified document hidden in a false bottom he'd built into his briefcase. He arrived home at 2 a.m. to find his apartment door ajar. Nothing was obviously missing. His furniture was in place, his books undisturbed. But someone had been through his files. The folders were in the wrong order. Papers he'd left face down were now face up. And Helen's cassette tapes, the ones he'd left on his desk, were gone.
the copies. Thank God for the copies.
He'd mailed duplicates to his colleagues. The originals were gone, but the evidence survived. Whoever had broken in didn't know about the safety measures. Or maybe they did, and this was a message. We can reach you anywhere. Lindquist didn't sleep that night. He sat in his armchair with the lights off, watching the street through his window, waiting for headlights that never came. In the morning, he called the campus police and reported a burglary. They took his statement with polite indifference. Nothing was stolen, they noted, just some tapes. 3 days after the break-in, Lindquist received a phone call from Warren Holt.
Paul, we need to talk. Not at the office. There's a diner on Route 13, past the Ithaca town line. Meet me there at noon.
The diner was nearly empty when Lindquist arrived. A few truckers at the counter, an elderly couple in a corner booth. Holt was already seated, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wasn't drinking from.
I've been thinking about what you said. About Helen. About what her life was worth.
And
I didn't know they would hurt her. I swear to God, Paul, I didn't know.
His voice was barely above a whisper.
They told me it was national security. They said the research was classified for good reasons. I believed them.
Who is they?
A man from the Office of Naval Research. He visited me in 1972. Said they needed someone to manage the survey schedules, keep researchers away from certain areas of the lake.
And you agreed.
They offered to fund my entire department. I thought I was helping my country. When Helen changed her survey route, I reported it. I was supposed to report any deviation from the approved schedule. I thought they would just talk to her, maybe reassign her research area.
What happened instead?
A week later, she was dead. And a week after that, 2 men came to my office with a new grant agreement and a reminder that I'd signed a secrecy oath in 1972.
Holt's eyes were wet. He'd been carrying this for 4 months.
I didn't kill her, Paul. But I might as well have.
Who did? Who was on that boat?
I don't know. They never told me operational details. I just managed the schedules.
But you know someone who knows.
Holt was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card.
This is the man who recruited me. He's still active. If anyone knows what happened on that lake, it's him.
The card read, Commander Richard Shaw, USN, retired. Northern Acoustic Research Limited. Northern Acoustic Research Limited. The same company that owned the property near Plattsburgh. Lindquist stared at the business card as Holt gathered his coat to leave.
Warren, why are you telling me this now?
Because I'm dying, Paul. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I've been carrying this guilt since October, and I can't take it to my grave.
He stood, unsteady on his feet.
I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am.
Lindquist watched him walk to his car, a hunched figure moving through the gray afternoon light. Whatever moral calculations Warren Holt had made in 1972, he was paying for them now. But his confession didn't bring Helen back. Nothing would. Lindquist sat in the diner booth for another hour, studying the business card. Commander Richard Shaw. The man who had orchestrated Helen's surveillance. The man who might have ordered her death. The man he was going to confront. The address on Shaw's business card was a P.O. box, but Lindquist had another lead. The property near Plattsburgh, 40 acres of lakefront land with chain-link fencing and security cameras. If Northern Acoustic Research operated a facility there, Shaw would have reason to visit. Lindquist parked his car half a mile from the property and approached on foot through the winter woods. The security camera at the gate was the same one he'd seen before, still panning its slow arc. But now there was a car parked inside the fence, a dark blue sedan with government plates. Paul, I've been thinking about what happens if I'm right about all this. The university has been complicit for years. The Navy has been operating in secret on American soil. Her words echoed in his mind as he watched the facility from behind a fallen oak. Somewhere inside that fence was the shore-based component of the system Helen had detected. The listening post that received signals from the underwater installation. The operation that had gotten her killed. Lindquist waited in the woods for 2 hours, watching the facility. A man emerged from a low concrete building around 4 o'clock. Tall, gray-haired, wearing a navy peacoat over civilian clothes. He walked to the sedan with the confident stride of someone who owned everything around him. Commander Richard Shaw. Lindquist recognized the bearing, the posture of authority. This was the man who had recruited Warren Holt. The man who had managed the cover operation at Cornell for over a decade. The man who had sent someone to silence Helen Marsh. Shaw drove away without checking his surroundings. Why would he? He operated with impunity. The Navy protected him. The university cooperated. No one had ever challenged him. Lindquist noted the sedan's license plate and retreated through the woods to his car. He didn't have enough evidence yet. But he knew where Shaw worked. He knew the facility existed. And he had Helen's recordings, her notes, her letter. The pieces were coming together. Back in Ithaca, Lindquist spread his evidence across his kitchen table. Helen's tapes, her annotated charts, her letter, the classified ONR report from Whitfield, Warren Holt's confession, the business card, the property records, the harbor master's log.
Here's what happened.
He was talking to himself, but he needed to hear it out loud to make sure it made sense.
The Navy has been operating an underwater listening station in Lake Champlain since at least 1968. They use Cornell's acoustic research program as cover, legitimate science that justifies their presence. Warren Holt was recruited in '72 to manage survey schedules, keep researchers away from sensitive areas. For 10 years, it worked. Then, Helen changed her route without telling anyone.
He paced the small kitchen, building the case.
She detected the installation. She documented the signals. She realized what she was looking at. Holt reported her deviation, and someone, Shaw or someone working for Shaw, decided she was a security risk that needed to be eliminated. The morning of October 14th, Helen moved the Cayuga to the deep water coordinates. She was recording the installation's signals when an unmarked boat approached. The gray hull the harbor master saw, the engines Ruth Novak heard through the fog. They intercepted her. They took her logbook, her recordings, her data. Then they disposed of her body in 300 feet of cold water.
He stopped pacing. The conclusion was clear, but saying it aloud made it real.
They made it look like an accident. Drowned while conducting research. The Coast Guard closed the case in 3 days because someone told them to. The Navy paid Cornell $200,000 to seal her files and keep everyone quiet. And Warren Holt, who had been managing the cover-up for a decade, was too scared and too complicit to object.
Lindquist looked at the evidence spread across his table. It was enough to prove what happened, but it wasn't enough to do anything about it. Shaw was protected. The Navy would deny everything. He needed more. Lindquist called the Burlington Free Press the next morning. He asked for the reporter who had covered Helen's drowning.
This is Carl Jenkins.
Mr. Jenkins, my name is Paul Lindquist. I'm a professor at Cornell. I have information about the Helen Marsh case.
That case is closed, Professor.
It was closed in 3 days, with no investigation. I have evidence that Dr. Marsh was murdered to protect a classified Navy operation on Lake Champlain.
Silence on the line. Then,
I'm listening.
I have her personal recordings, her research notes, a letter she wrote predicting her own death, testimony from witnesses who saw an unmarked boat approach her vessel, and a confession from a Cornell administrator who was paid to manage the cover-up.
Jesus Christ.
I need to meet with you in person. Bring a photographer. I want everything documented before someone tries to stop me.
Where and when?
Burlington waterfront. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'll be at the marina where they found her boat.
the drive to Burlington took 4 hours in light snow. Lindquist arrived early, parking near the closed marina where Ed Farrell kept his office. The harbor master was waiting.
You sure about this?
I'm sure. Someone needs to tell the truth about what happened here.
They'll come after you. Same way they came after her.
Maybe. But I've sent copies to people who'll release everything if something happens to me. They can't silence all of us.
A white van pulled into the parking lot. Carl Jenkins emerged with a photographer, a young woman carrying 2 cameras around her neck.
Professor Lindquist? Carl Jenkins. This is Sarah Riley.
Lindquist shook their hands. His pulse was racing, but his voice was steady.
Thank you for coming. What I'm about to show you is evidence of a murder and a government cover-up. I want you to photograph everything. Document every tape, every document, every piece of evidence. If something happens to me, this story needs to survive.
They moved inside Farrell's boathouse office, away from the cold and any watching eyes. Lindquist spread his evidence on the harbor master's desk, while Riley photographed each item.
Walk me through it, from the beginning.
Lindquist told the story. Helen's discovery, the 47 Hz signal, the underwater installation, the Navy's involvement, Warren Holt's confession, Commander Shaw. Jenkins took notes in a shorthand Lindquist couldn't read.
This is explosive, if even half of it's true.
It's all true. I've spent 4 months verifying every piece.
The Navy will deny everything.
They can try, but they can't deny Helen's recordings. They can't deny the property records. They can't deny that Warren Holt confessed on his deathbed.
Jenkins looked up from his notes.
Holt is dead?
He died 2 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. But I recorded our conversation at the diner. He gave me Shaw's name willingly.
You have that on tape?
I have everything on tape.
They were halfway through the evidence review when the door opened. A tall man in a navy peacoat stepped into the boathouse, followed by 2 younger men in civilian clothes with military haircuts.
Professor Lindquist, I was hoping we could talk before you did something you'd regret.
Commander Richard Shaw, in person. His voice was calm, almost friendly.
How did you find me? We've been watching you since your visit to MIT. You're not as careful as you think.
Jenkins stepped forward, notepad in hand.
Commander Shaw, Carl Jenkins, Burlington Free Press. I'd like to ask you some questions about the death of Helen Marsh.
There's nothing to discuss. Dr. Marsh drowned in a boating accident. The investigation was thorough.
Then why are you here with 2 armed escorts trying to stop a professor from talking to the press?
Shaw's smile didn't waver.
I'm here to prevent the unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Professor Lindquist has materials in his possession that are government property. Government property? Helen's personal recordings? Her private letters? You're claiming those belong to the Navy? Any material related to classified programs becomes government property upon creation. Dr. Marsh signed agreements when she joined the Cornell program. She didn't know she was part of a classified program. That's the whole point.
Shaw's escorts moved further into the room, positioning themselves between Lindquist and the door.
Professor, let me be clear. If you proceed with this, you'll be prosecuted under the Espionage Act. Your career will be destroyed. Your colleagues at Cornell, MIT, everywhere you've been asking questions, they'll face consequences too. And if I don't proceed, you go home, you forget what you think you learned. The Free Press doesn't run a story that would embarrass the Navy during sensitive arms control negotiations. Everyone wins, except Helen. Dr. Marsh is dead, Professor. Nothing you do will change that.
Lindquist felt his hands trembling, not from fear, from rage.
You killed her. You sent someone to intercept her that morning in the fog. You took her research and threw her body into 300 feet of water. That's a very serious accusation. I have witnesses who saw your unmarked boat. I have Helen's recordings documenting the signals she detected. I have Warren Holt's confession that he reported her deviation from approved survey routes. And I have the classified ONR report proving that the signals she found match Soviet submarine communication protocols your installation was designed to detect.
Shaw's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes.
You've been running an illegal domestic surveillance operation for 15 years, using an American university as cover. And when a researcher accidentally discovered what you were doing, you had her murdered. I already have. Copies of everything are with lawyers, journalists, and colleagues across the country. If anything happens to me, to anyone in this room, the story goes public immediately. You can't stop it anymore.
Shaw was silent for a long moment. His escorts looked to him for instructions, but he didn't move.
You're bluffing. Am I? Call MIT and ask if James Whitfield received a package from me last week. Call the ACLU and ask if their legal department has documents related to Navy operations on Lake Champlain. Call the New York Times and ask if they've received an anonymous tip about a Cornell professor with evidence of a government cover-up.
Lindquist reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a cassette tape.
This is my conversation with Warren Holt. He names you specifically. He describes how you recruited him, how you paid him, how you instructed him to report any researcher who deviated from approved routes. He died 2 weeks ago, Commander. He had nothing left to lose.
Shaw's jaw tightened.
That recording is inadmissible. In court, maybe. In the press, it's devastating.
Commander, would you like to make a statement for the record?
Shaw turned to leave. His escorts moved to follow.
You've made a mistake, Professor. a serious mistake. The only mistake was thinking you could silence the truth by silencing Helen.
Shaw paused at the door.
Dr. Marsh drowned in a boating accident. That's the official record. It will remain the official record, regardless of what fantasies you publish in small-town newspapers.
The Burlington Free Press isn't that small, Commander, and neither is our wire service.
Shaw walked out without another word. His escorts followed, closing the door behind them. Through the boathouse window, Lindquist watched them drive away.
He'll be back, with lawyers, injunctions, federal marshals.
Then we'd better work fast.
He turned to Jenkins.
How quickly can you get this story ready?
If we work through the night, tomorrow's edition.
The Burlington Free Press ran the story on March 4th, 1983. Cornell professor claims Navy cover-up in lake drowning. The wire services picked it up by noon. By evening, it was on network news. The Navy issued a denial. Cornell issued a statement expressing concern about unauthorized disclosure of research materials. The Coast Guard stood by its original finding of accidental drowning. But the story wouldn't die. Other reporters started digging. The property records for Northern Acoustic Research became public. The classified documents Lindquist had obtained were leaked to Congress. A Senate subcommittee announced hearings. Commander Richard Shaw retired from government service 3 weeks after the story broke. He was never charged with any crime. Neither was anyone else. Helen Marsh's death remained officially ruled an accident, but the listening station was dismantled. The Cornell Acoustic Research Program lost its Navy funding, and the 47 Hz signal that Helen had detected in the deep waters of Lake Champlain was never heard again. In April, the ice broke on Lake Champlain. Paul Lindquist drove to Burlington one last time. He walked to the waterfront where Ruth Novak had heard engines in the fog 6 months earlier. The water was gray and cold, choppy with spring wind. He carried Helen's letter in his coat pocket, the one she'd written but never mailed. "If something happens to me, I trust you to do the right thing." He'd done what she asked. The story was public. The operation was exposed. But Helen was still dead, her body somewhere in 300 feet of dark water, and the men who killed her would never face justice. Lindquist stood at the water's edge for a long time. Then he took the letter from his pocket, read it one final time, and let the wind carry it out over the lake. The paper caught an updraft and rose, white against the gray sky, before settling gently onto the water. It floated there for a moment, Helen's words dissolving into the lake she had loved. Then it was gone. Lindquist walked back to his car alone.